Gonna get started in just a second here. Okay. Boom. All right. All right, guys. Now it is time to get going and get the stream live here too. All right, guys. So we're talking today about what I learned listening to David Goggins live. That was a fucking experience, to put it lightly. But I'm going to give it a second to let some people roll in before we get started. And guys, as always, the goal of this show is to help athletes reach the higher levels in sport, help athletes build their dream careers. So as you're tuning in, if you have not tuned into the podcast before, make sure you go check out the Elite Development Podcast. All major platforms you can find podcasts on, you can find me. So make sure you go check that out. And we're going to get into it really quick. I'm doing great, Abdul. Hope you're doing well too. We're going to get into things really quick. So I'm talking today about what I learned listening to David Goggins live. And I'm going to preface this all by saying I'm not even going to try to, play around. I've got notes sitting here because that was a hell of an experience. And honestly, I'm still processing a lot of it. And I'm probably going to do a couple of podcasts talking about this. But I tried to condense the whole talk down into, the three major points. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. The three major points that I took away from listening to David Goggins live. So guys, let's get into the show. We're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the #1 show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I am your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we are talking about what I learned listening to David Goggins speak live. Now, a little bit of background. So this past weekend, I went to an event in Salt Lake City, Utah. It was called the Limitless Arena. And they had the most ridiculous lineup of speakers I've ever seen in my life. Gary Vaynerchuk, David Goggins, Jim Quick, who's a memory expert, Brad Lee, who's a business, just overall badass. Who else? Russell Brunson, and a bunch of other. Andy Frisella finished the whole night off. Like massive lineup of just absolute studs. And one of the ones I was the most excited about was the fact that David Goggins was going to be there and he was going to be speaking. Because honestly, I know so many people do, but he was definitely a huge inspiration for a long time for me. And just the mentality, like I never had aspirations to be like David Goggins, because if you know who he is, you know that he's a absolute psychopath in the best way possible. But just the mentality, and like that mentality of when you think you're done, you're 40% of the way there that he talks about was always super inspirational to me and really made me realize how much harder I'm actually able to push myself, whether physically, mentally, whatever else it might be. So this weekend, I got the absolutely incredible opportunity to actually get to listen to him speak live and listen to him, dig into a little bit about who he is, about what he does, about, his mentality and everything like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Now, the #1 point that I had when I was going through all my notes from his speech was that if you want to have the kind of motivation, the kind of drive, the kind of dedication that he does to literally just being a bad motherfucker, if you want to have that same kind of dedication to your sport, to your career, to whatever it is you're pursuing, you need to learn to perform without purpose. And basically what he talked about is when you perform without purpose, you're training because training is what you do. You're not training because, I have to do it because of this other external reason. Because the external reasons of, where you want to get in your career, certain things you want to achieve, whatever it might be, the motivation behind those comes and goes. It's like, but if you learn to perform without purpose, if you learn to just, this be just what you do, regardless of anything else, then what starts to happen is you start to get more results because you're not relying on any kind of motivation. You just wake up and you do those things that you know you have to do, regardless of how you're feeling, regardless of what else is going on, because that's what the fuck you do. And one of the really cool parts that he talked about with, excuse me, within that was his morning runs every day. And he talked about, if you know who David Goggins is, his whole thing is basically he just runs all the time, everywhere, no matter what. And he talked about, what goes into those runs, because the interviewer asked him, he was like, I know you do this every day. Like, you go for these long runs first thing in the morning. It's like, are you always motivated to do that? Like, why do you do that every day? And he talked about, performing without purpose. He's like, that's just what the fuck I do. Like, I wake up and I go running longer than most people would ever want to go running. And then when he talked about it, he said, of course, he doesn't feel motivated to do it every day. There are a lot of days where he wakes up and he doesn't want to do it. And he had, honestly, the most simple routine to get himself going that it just, it made me laugh. But I've actually used it twice already since coming back from this event. So he was talking about how when he wakes up in the morning and he doesn't feel like doing it, like he doesn't feel like doing the thing, he doesn't feel like going for the run, he literally sits down, looks down at his running shoes, and just starts bobbing his head and goes, hell yeah. And then just repeats that, 2, 3, 4, 5 times until he feels the energy come back. And then he puts on his shoes and he heads out the fucking door. And it's like, it's the most simple thing in the world. But I tried it on Monday because I got back at 11:30 Sunday night. And I woke up at 4 o'clock Monday morning and went for my workout. And that was absolutely the last thing in the world I wanted to do. But I literally sat and did the same thing. Like, I got to the gym, I sat down on one of the benches, and I just looked at the floor and I went, hell yeah. And then it just 2 or 3 times of just repeating that and getting a little bit louder. And I was like, shit, I'm ready to train. Let's do this. So I was working off about 3.5 hours of sleep, and I had one of the best workouts of my life. So it's crazy how simple that kind of shit is, but it works. But the main point of performing without purpose that I want to get across to you guys is don't let it be negotiable. If you're trying to work towards a UFC championship, if you're trying to work towards, any kind of high level achievement, the work that goes into it can't be negotiable. It can't be, oh, I'm really busy today, so I won't train when I'm supposed to train. Oh, money's a little tight right now, so I gotta pull back on my gym memberships. It's like, no, you gotta find a fucking way. Because if you perform every day and it just becomes what you do, you're going to get so much better because it's never negotiable. Even on the days you don't want to, even on the days you're not feeling like it, you're showing up and you're doing it, you're going to be far and above anybody that you're competing against. And now, the next piece that I wanted to talk about was what he called the foxhole mentality. And so he talked about how we have 2 different types of friends. The example that he used specifically was, he talked about how when you're, if you had a friend in law school, as an example, you got the one type of friend that when that friend in law school calls them up and they say, man, things are really hard, studying's really kicking my ass, I kind of want to quit. The one friend is going to be like, oh, it's okay. Yeah, just chill for a little bit. You earned it. Relax. It's okay. If you don't finish, that's fine. And just kind of lets you sit in that, feeling of wanting to quit and justifies it with you. It's like, then you have the other friend that you call them up and you say, hey, I want to quit. And their response is, hey, look, I'm going to come over. I'm going to help you study. If you need anything from me, I'm here to help you push through it. It's like, don't quit on yourself. You got this. And then keeps pushing you forward towards the goal that that they know you have. And he basically put it as, look at your social circle and ask, who would you want in your foxhole with you? Would you want the friend that's always, justifying and making things easier and telling you it's okay and telling you it's not a big deal and you can fail and that's fine? Or do you want the friend that's going to go out of their way to do anything that they can to help you? And on that note as well, an important point is, if you're going to expect that kind of friend in your foxhole, you've got to be that kind of friend for other people too. Right? So ask yourself, what kind of friend are you when you've got somebody that wants to quit, when you've got somebody that, wants to settle in with the excuses and all of that? And then ask yourself, what kind of friends are your friends? Are they the ones that are going to tell you it's okay to quit? Or are they the ones who are going to help you push through when things get harder? Now, that one was really cool for me too, because I've realized there are definitely moments, even as a coach, where I've let athletes sit in, the excuses, sit in a little bit of like oh, it's too hard right now, I can't do it right now, and just kind of let it go. And then I realized that at the time, it might feel like you're being a good guy, but in the end, you're harming them more than you're helping them. And this isn't to say there's never a moment where you should ever take a step back. Like, yeah, there are going to be things that happen, I'm sure. But ask yourself, are you taking a step back because you have to, or are you taking a step back because it's easier? And then be the type of person that doesn't take the step back when it's easier, that continues to push through no matter how difficult things get. That one was super powerful too, and definitely something that I'm working on now as a coach, and I'm wanting to push forward both as a coach and a person, because that second type of friend, although they might not be as nice to have in the moment, they're the ones who are going to greatly benefit your life over the longer periods of time. Now, the next one and the final point that we're going to get into in the podcast today is the last piece that Goggins talked about. The interviewer was asking him, he said, you go for these super early morning runs every day. And you talked about how, there are a lot of days where you don't want to do it, but you just do it anyway. And you go 20, 30, 40 miles. And, there's nobody watching you. Like, why, what makes you keep going even though nobody's watching? What makes you decide, I'm not just going to quit right here? Like, when the run gets tough, like, what makes you say, nobody's watching, it doesn't matter at all to literally anyone, if I just give up and quit right here? Why do you keep going? Why do you keep pushing? And he basically said, he's like, I go for these runs early in the morning, so it's still dark out when I'm out for these runs. And, every time I pass a house and I see the lights off, snatching those motherfuckers' souls. And it just cracked me up, because he even said, he's like, they might not know it, but as I pass by that house and I know that I'm working and I know that I'm, being that guy that I said I'm going to be, I'm snatching those motherfuckers' souls. It's like, I'm getting shit in before anybody else has their eyes open. And what I really took from that, and what I think can really help you as well, is you've got to create those little games for yourself. Now, where this gets dangerous when it comes to a lot of athletes is a lot of athletes want to push like a guy like David Goggins, because they say, taking souls, we're doing all this thing. It's like a badass, cool mentality to have. But if you try to train like David Goggins, you're going to fucking die. And that's not a shot at anyone. Like, he has legitimately talked about that in the past himself. But taking that mentality towards your training is a really cool idea. And when I say take that mentality towards your training of snatching people's souls, of, making those little games for yourself where, he might not know it, but I just snatched that motherfucker's soul by doing the work that he's not doing. Instead of just looking at that in the way of, how much work you're putting in, start looking at that in terms of how you're treating your nutrition, how you're treating your recovery, how you're treating your training, how you're treating every area of your game that creates the professional you're trying to become. Right? Because if you just look at that as training and you think, I got to train 12, 15 hours a day because that's what David Goggins does, it's not going to end well for you. But if you take that same mentality of going above and beyond, like he talked about, and you put that into every area of your game, you put that into everything that you do, now you're going to be able to rise above, because not only are you going to be pushing yourself at 100% with your training, but you're going to be taking better care of all those other areas, and you're going to give yourself that little edge on competition every single day in every area of your game. And that ultimately is the key that is going to allow you to be successful. That's ultimately the key that's going to allow you to push above the other people you compete against. So guys, those are the three first big main points that I got from this talk with David Goggins. We are for sure going to be digging into this one again. There was so much more information. I could have talked about this for about 4.5 hours, but I like to keep the podcast a little bit bite-sized, give a little piece of information, and then keep going from there. But I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you got some value. If you did, I would love to know what it is. Make sure you send me a message, whether that's on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever it is you're seeing this. and let me know what it was you took away and what it was you can implement from the podcast today to your own career to help you start moving forward and help you start to build that dream career that you're after. So guys, I appreciate you. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Appreciate you, Kenny. Oh. Am I back? I think my connection